Alright. Hello everyone. It's nice to be back again. So y'all will get to hear this Lunar music. So anyway, welcome to the review of Lunar 2 Eternal Blue Complete. I finished the main game earlier and I wanted to do... This is the part where we normally just go through and I tell you my impressions and review a few things about the game while it's still fresh in my mind. We are also going to... And so, as I mentioned in the main stream, there's actually an epilogue section that's another 10 hours of the game. I think maximum, or it's probably going to take us that long. So, I've decided to move that into its own section at another time. So we will not be doing the epilogue immediately after. We will be just moving on to the new game because the epilogue is basically somewhat like a sequel of sorts. It's like a little thing, not a little thing. It's a significant grind. So it's a lot like is it? Nah, probably not as long as the answer for Persona 3, but it's still excuse me, a sizable chunk of content, and some time has passed. So we're going to go ahead and move that to some other time. So I will play it eventually, but I've decided not to go for it to do it because it's not part of the main story anymore, and it's more of like what happened after the main story. And so anyway, enough about that. That's not part of the review. So we're going to go ahead and review Lunar 2 Eternal Blue Complete, and I've just finished it, and we are at let's see, how long did it take us to get to the epilogue? So I'm here at Gwen's place. It took us 49 hours. Okay, we almost reached the 50-hour mark, but because of like a lot of NPC talking and grinding and so on and so forth. So anyway, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and review the game, and usually how I do it is between like story, well, I can't think of... No. Story, graphics, sound, gameplay, and then I just give a final thoughts about this. So, this game is quite... Hello, Zeo Corbett, welcome. You're here to listen to me rant about games, then. But in seriousness, so yeah, those are like the 4 aspects I usually do. I usually do a final thing at the end. Let's see, what do I have to say about Lunar 2 Eternal Blue? So, I guess we'll just go ahead and start with the story. So... One thing I will say, I will be making comparisons to the previous game, Lunar Silver Star Story Complete, or what I remember of it. It's been a long time. Excuse me. So, as far as, just the main story, and I'm not going to include the epilogue, because I have not played it, and I cannot say anything about it. But, for the main story, I would say it's definitely a lot more interesting than the previous... Well, not that the previous game was bad, but it was definitely more idealistic. It was a little more straightforward. There was a couple of twists, especially the Vile Tribe and but even Galleon. I mean, you kind of suspected something was up. That was back then. But this story is kind of interesting, where you're just trying to it's a little more intriguing. Things don't play out the way you thought they were going to. And I also like the fact that you're not oh, you are the hero, you are the chosen one, you will do you are going unlike Lunar Silver Star Story Complete, where basically you're just told Alex, you are the Dragon Master, you are the chosen one, you will save this world. And then of course there are a few twists to make it so that it wasn't quite that straightforward, but eventually you did win. But in this case, this one is interesting because you have Lucia, who is... You have the story of Lucia, who was originally going to just she didn't understand humanity, so she was just going to sacrifice everybody in order to stop Zolfar and to recreate a new world. But that didn't end up happening. And at first, in the story, you're even not really sure where things are going to go. So you're just kind of going along and trying to get Lucia to meet Althena, and then of course as you go on you find out you're still dealing with this really enigmatic religious organization, the Chosen of Althena, who are not actually serving Althena. And I do like the fact that it was like kind of like incorporated, like, yeah, this is the shadiest religious organization. So this is what happened after many years after Lunar Silver Star story complete. Excuse me. So I like that one. Like, also the characters are a little more interesting. Like, my opinion. Like, not that, like, I did like the previous characters a lot. This one is more like nobody's really, because the previous one you kind of had like, okay, I guess, let me think. You had, well, everyone was kind of like related to someone significant. In this case, this one is more like, yeah, it's a bit darker. Like, there's Jean's past, and she was almost like, she's still, her past was much a bit darker than the others, because she was like she was like a child soldier, and then like she managed to break out, and like that's kind of like the thing is where she's like, she wanted to like had to kind of confront her own past about like, and also like find closure, and by defeating the very master who taught her to do all these bad things. There's Lamina. She's not like, whereas Mia Alsa was more of like she's more like the stereotypical mage. Ooh, there's a spider here. Anyway, I was like, it just popped out of nowhere. Yo, you can hang out here, but not too long. I was like, it just like dropped out of nowhere. But anyway, sorry, I had a little distraction there. So yeah, Lamina is very different from Mia Alsa, and she's kind of like she's pinching pennies, and like because she's inheriting a different kind of vein. She's nobility, but it's kind of a meaningless nobility at that point, because like Vane is definitely not, and it's not the place, the place it used to be. So it's more of like, did you get a guess on your view? Yeah, I just did. I got a spider or something. He was just like, yo, I want to hang out here. I'm like, nah, it's okay. I don't know what its name is. It disappeared into the ether. Let's see. And you also have Ronfar, who had to. Yeah, so like everyone was really, really interesting. They were more like down to earth, I think, because like Ronfar was like, he's just like not just a knave. He was just like a former church. He used to be part of the church, and then he was disillusioned, and then he just kind of went into a low point of his life. Not to mention, he felt extreme guilt, of what he had done to Mari, the love of his life. So it was kind of like running away from that too. So I always thought that was really, I thought that was interesting, where like every character has like their own like demons to deal with, and I guess, and also like, and Hero himself is just like, he's not a chosen one. Like there's no like, oh, you need to become the Dragon Master. Like, they're mentioned that he might be a strongest one, but he's never, like, called a Dragon Master straight up, and he didn't do that fancy armor transformation that Alex had to go through. You do meet the 4 dragons, but that's only because you're not doing it for a Dragon Master. You're doing it for Lucia to get the power to defeat Zofar, and it didn't work out. So you had to do it the hard way. Basically, using the power of humanity. So it's just reaffirming the themes of like the first game, where the first game was like, yo, the reason you overcame was not because like you fought inevitability, I guess like fighting your own fate, right? Like humanity fought its own fate. They didn't need a goddess anymore, and they fought for themselves, and they were able to prevail. And that's how Galleon fell. And the other thing is like interesting is also they took the character of Galleon, and like of course it's like the way he used to be, where he was just like I mean, he is bitter. I mean, like he was killed for sure. Like he died, and then he was just brought back into like this not so stable form. But it's really interesting where he's playing the bad guy, but he's not the bad guy, and he was just kind of like moving things along didn't interfere in the time, did never killed you straight up, so you suspected something was up because he would not have hesitated if he actually wanted to. But like eventually, like that becomes a point in the story where he was like, Galleon, we're sparing you. We're not going to kill you because I know you've been working for us the whole time. Like you had many chances to kill us and you never did. So, and like you had no reason to spare us, and so we knew something was up. And this basically, that was kind of interesting too, where I guess Galleon got a way to redeem himself for what what he did before, and he was like, he's like, that's why he knew the power of humanity. He was defeated by it in some sense. So I think that was really cool. I like the little continuity about like how the world became after the events of Lunar Superstar Story Complete. And there's also like the little plot line with Althena, Luna, or as she came to be, she discarded her goddess title, and then like, because if you remember what had happened in the first game, you would be like, oh yeah, that's right, Luna decided to stay human. She decided not to be a goddess anymore, and so she became mortal, and obviously she passed away long before the game began. So that's also an interesting point where you find out the results of what had happened, and like that was pretty cool. So there's a lot of stuff that ties into the first game, then like and it's actually it makes the story really interesting. Like I like the fact that the characters had more to them. They were more down to earth, like not dealing with just nobility. And we're not dealing with chosen ones. We're just dealing with a bunch of people that came together around Lucia. And I guess like Lucia is kind of the mover shaker of the plot story, really. And like the only time you have to the only reason you ever have to rescue her is because she sacrificed herself for them. So unlike Luna, where it's like, oh, she got captured, so it feels like I rescued the princess kind of deal. But like this case, it was not that way, and like it took everyone's power to do it. And like there's like a lot of making sure that Lucia is very, like, she's powerful for sure. And the only reason you had to save her was because she lost her powers for your sake. And you do it, you guys. And then the people who finish off so far are Hero and Lucia. So yeah, I actually really like the story. I will say that if you did not, like in like other games, like if you had not played Lunar Superstar Story Complete, you'd be like, I feel like the story wouldn't make as much sense to you, or like you wouldn't understand the significance of some things. And I think that is one thing to keep in mind. So overall, I think I kind of like the story. I did enjoy the story. I think that was probably the fun part of it. And also like the NPC lines are pretty silly. Like it's working design, so there are some things where they added jokes that are just like really dated, and I don't think I like that much. So that is one thing that is just like, oh my gosh, people are not gonna remember some of these jokes, dude. That was from too long ago. But like for the most part, like the script is pretty funny, and like and like I like they like say the silliest things when they're trying to like, yo, you're a now they're like not just doing it like the stereotypical like you're terrible, they're like they'll say something like really call the villain names. It's actually really funny, but I knew they're trying to rile themselves up for like the confrontations. So overall, yeah, I think I really enjoyed it. I might enjoy it even a bit more than the previous one, because like there was a bunch of twists and turns I wasn't anticipating, and I didn't know, and it was not obvious what the structure of the story was until much later, and you had to deal with all these like crazy things like false churches. Oh my goodness, they got everything. And like the children were just like, oh my gosh, they make me so angry, because like that's the worst thing. And like as someone who goes to a church, it's just like you see corrupt churches, you're just like, oh, You guys give us such a bad name. I really like you guys. You ruined this for us, and like you're taking advantage. You're leeches taking advantage of the people you're supposed to serve. But anyway, I talked about that at great length during the stream a couple of times. Anyway, so yeah, I really did enjoy the story. Let's see. So that means I go to graphics. And I'm kind of glad this game has aged better because it is using it's using the sprites rather than a lot of 3D. I don't remember there ever being 3D other than like maybe the effects. And I guess there's that one type of enemy, but no, I don't think so. I don't think there was any much 3D in the game at all. I think it's mostly using the game since it was being used mostly for the 2D elements. So I think it's aged pretty well. It still looks pretty good. Like the colors are they're definitely I was gonna say like are the colors as limited? No, they're not as limited. Like the sprites look pretty neat and like it actually still looks pretty nice. Though I mean, is it like the most well designed thing, like the most awesome sprite work I've ever seen? Maybe not, but it's certainly like it doesn't feel like oh my goodness I can't stand looking at this old 3D. So I'm actually glad they opted for 2D instead. The dungeons are pretty interesting looking. I will say that sometimes it became difficult to mostly like this is a final dungeon complaint, but like it became difficult to tell whether what was walkable or not, and it's like it became hard to see what was going on. See what's going on in the dungeon, or like which path are you supposed to go, because like it started becoming kind of samey. That's a little more related to gameplay. So I like I really like the portraits that are very expressive for sure. So that's a huge plus, and because this game is very much like they're trying to push the the anime part of the game, or like the animated characters and the portraits, and like obviously the videos got compressed thanks to JRPG Final Judges are usually a mess. It shouldn't be that way though. Some of them are well designed. But a lot of like there are like this game not so much. I don't think I like. But I will talk about that more when we get to gameplay. But I agree that I mean like I do think it's important that you should be able to see what you're doing. The final dungeon, especially the last two floors, are like sometimes like am I able to walk through this? Oh, I can. Oh, this is weird. Yeah, it's like an oddball. Excuse me. But anyway, like the dungeons are pretty nice looking. I mean, they get a little bit, I will say, for some of them are better than others. Others were a little on the plain side. They're like, oh, that's expected. There's nothing like particularly interesting. Like you're not gonna have the intricacies of like the backgrounds in like Final Fantasy VIII, for instance. Those are really, really good, by the way. Those gave a lot of character. You're kind of not gonna have that. It's not quite as expressive as some of like the stuff that would be associated with Squaresoft, but it's pretty good. And like the world of Lunar, it it's not it is pretty like okay. It's kind of sorta. It's not steampunky. It's this weird it's not 1700s. I get the same time it's not, though it's a very interesting world. Like I don't know if it's very special looking, but like yeah, the sprites look pretty nice. The map is like for the most part is fine. It's like the locales are about what you expect, so nothing too out of the ordinary, but good enough. And at the very least they still look presentable. And I think that makes a lot of difference, especially for something from this era. Have you thought of adding background music to these reviews? Sure. Usually I had the game do it, but I could just load. I could load Gwyn's place. Why not? You know, It does sound a little hollow without it, right? So anyway, I mean, I've obviously lowered down the volume a lot compared to where it was earlier, but yeah, the game was not this soft when I was playing it. You get to see. So there you go. See, that's Hero right there. Those awesome portraits are pretty nice. But yeah, maybe for, well, I guess for future reviews, should I add, like, I guess you have to be careful about adding background music that's not, that Twitch likes. But anyway, for graphics, yeah, otherwise, it's, like, it's pretty good. I can read the text, that's always an important thing. And it's not an eyesore, so it's pretty nice. So how about that playable epilogue? Well, I'm getting to that in a... I'm gonna actually... Oh, I was saying earlier, for the playable epilogue, I'm going to treat it as its own separate game. Because essentially, it's about like a lot of sizable amount of content, about 10 hours long. So I'm probably gonna do it as a short game, as a replacement, as like kind of like a short game style. Because it's kind of like a thing that happens after the main story, so I think it could be good for as a substitute for like later on. Like I might play it late. I'm not sure if I'll play it this year, but definitely like maybe really early next year, so I'm not too far away from this playthrough. Anyway, so let's move on to sounds. So like I'll first talk about the music quality. Like I like the soundtrack for the most part. Like I'm probably gonna remember some of these themes. Is it my favorite? I don't know if it is. The songs are, yeah, it's like a Lunar 2.5 essentially. Thankfully, it's not as long as the main quest, but from this point, I would have to grind the characters all the way to level 56. To have a chance of defeating the bosses. It's basically like a really short version of... I know, I was comparing it to Persona 3 The Answer, and I kind of feel like that's probably how it seems like, but it's not as long from what I know, from what I've heard. So, probably would play it with a guide and not blind, because I don't want to waste your time. So, but that's not for this particular... not this time. So, for sound, music's kind of nice. I mean, like, I don't have anything to... I don't think I heard anything that's, like, really, like, offensively bad, or, like... The sound effects are pretty interesting. I know some of them were added by Working Designs as well, so they've kind of tweaked it a bit. And I know that. And the monster noises are pretty amusing, for sure. Like, rah! When they try to attack you, it's kind of funny, actually. But I have to say something about, like, that part is all fine. Like, the sound is, like, the soundtrack is very nice, and the sound effects work. Especially, like, the later themes, and, like, the more epic ones are pretty cool. So I definitely would give the soundtrack a listen. The voice acting, though, oh goodness. I mean, we don't have the Japanese version, so I can't say anything about the Japanese voice acting. But the English voice acting for this particular version of the game is... Oh boy. Like, I feel like a lot of it is just, like, a poor direction. And I don't know why. I don't know why Working Designs... Like, I know they've worked really hard on making sure the voicing works out, but I just don't know if the director is good. I'm just like... I expected... It should be better. I mean, for the time it was really good, but like now it doesn't compare, like in terms of the quality of the direction. So, like, I have to say for the most part, like, it's not great, honestly. Like, I think the weakest performances were probably, oh, Lucia, dear Lucia, great character, but her voice actress is just like, she was just directed really poorly. Like, there was no conviction for some parts that needed it, and there's like not enough. Like, I get that she's not supposed to be super emotional because she's still, at the time when you first meet her, she's still getting used to. She still doesn't understand emotion, but later it's like she's supposed to have more emotion, and it's just flat. It's just like a flat performance all for Lucia. Like, for especially the ending is just like it was so sing-songy. It's just like I don't feel like the urgency, the intensity you're supposed to have. Like, yeah, so far you should. These are not the things you don't understand these things. Blah 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 blah. So yeah, it wasn't very strong performance at all. I think the other offender is, like, honestly, Lamina. Like, she should be like. She should be sassier. It's just like, it's so held back. It was so like normal, delivered so normally. That was like, oh no, this doesn't seem right. Like, I found that very difficult to get behind. Like, I don't think she did a good job. And Leo was like, not that great either. Other than taste my refreshments, that was pretty cool. That's a great line. Yeah, Leo could have definitely been better too. Like, there's just like a lot of these, everything just comes off really underacted. I think that's the problem. It's just a matter of underacting. Ronfair was good, actually. I don't think I had a problem with Ronfair. Galleon is, no, he's pretty good. I have to say that Galleon's definitely one of the stronger performances for sure. Even like from the first game, I kind of felt that way too. Hero was actually pretty good too. I don't think there was anything, like, there was some, like, I mean, some eyes where I felt like, okay, it was a little flat, but it was like never egregiously bad, like Lucius, where, oh, ouch. And Jean's is fine, I guess. She doesn't actually have that many voice lines from what I can remember, so it's hard to grade her because she doesn't talk that much, because she's not the most directly involved like Hero or Lucia are. Ruby's fine. Ruby's good. I think she did a great job. And some of the villains, like Lun, was alright too. I mean, that's the thing. Like, it's either alright to bad. Like, there's not anything like, wow, I literally thought that was very compelling. So if you're trying to think, I understand that it's also the time and the age for the game too. So this is like the very late 90s, 99, 2000. So it's not exactly fair to compare our current standards here in the 2019 all the way back to 2000. But yeah, I just have to be frank. It's like a little bit, just a lot of like direction issues. So I felt like it just made some performances just fall flat. It's just flat instead of like, they're either like cheesy sounding or flat. It's just like, oh, not as good as it could be. A lot of use of the filters though, and so far was pretty intimidating. I like that. I think he did a pretty good job of doing that. Of intimidating the player, so every time you hear that, like, echo, you're like, oh shoot, he's here, crap, and like, that's great because you felt that sense of dread when he came into the scene. Well, anyway, I think I've talked about sound enough. Basically, yeah, voice acting is just, it hurts the game. Just how like flat it can be. Alright, so now that I've talked about sound, let's talk about gameplay. I'll be like, I don't know how I feel about the gameplay. Like I actually like the other aspects of the game even more than the gameplay. Like, this is, for the most part, the system has not changed since Lunar Silver Star Story Complete, so I don't feel like it's really advanced. So it's kind of the same thing. So that's kind of a little bit disappointing that they didn't try to change it up too much. and like they're like the system battle system is basically the same. I think one problem I have with this game is that turn order is so weird. Like whereas like in the game like Final Fantasy or like it's very clear the turn order will be because like of the way this battle system works. This game, I feel like I like that you have time to think about what you want to do, but because you don't know the turn order, I felt like that was kind of annoying because sometimes you didn't know whether or not you should heal or maybe you should wait, or whether or not you could get a heal in time because you just don't know. And sometimes like the boss would just go first before Ronfahr the healer, or sometimes Ronfahr would go first, and you're like, oh shoot, the enemy hasn't attacked yet. Ronfahr just healed a fully healed party and wasted MP. So it's just like you're not given enough information to strategize, and that kind of bothers me a lot. Like you can make some strategies, but sometimes it's like just feels very random, and you're not sure if things will hit because you don't know the turn order and you're just taking educated guesses, and it was kind of annoying, and like I don't really like that system, like it that much. So I'm not really like a huge lover of the battle system. So that's kind of made battles sometimes very like difficult, and like you're only guaranteed. And so the only guarantee you have is that if you're high enough level and you have enough speed, you know you'll always go before the enemy, and then it's not an issue anymore because you'll have that certainty. But oftentimes you don't have that luxury, so you're like, I don't know whether they're gonna attack me first and they'll kill me. I'll say that the what was I gonna say again? The leveling curve isn't. Oh, it's pretty rough too. Like, this game definitely asks a lot from you. They want you to grind, so you don't get that much levels that quickly, and it will take quite a while. So oftentimes I felt like if I didn't kill all the enemies, I was basically going to be under-leveled, and the bosses are just going to blow me up. Like, it actually felt that way. So a lot of the boss battles are very, very difficult in this game. So this game definitely asks you to grind more, because they want you to... Oh, excuse me. They want you to have a certain level, and it really makes a huge difference. Like, you saw like earlier in the final boss, if I had not been one level above, I'd probably get wiped. And that became really difficult. So like one level can be the difference between life or death, so you have to do all that grinding. So that was kind of rough. It made the game like feel like, oh shit, I gotta fight all the enemies. And the other thing I need to mention is the lack of a mini-map. Honestly, it's not... I mean, like, I get that in this era is unusual, but there were definitely games that were showing what you could do with mini-maps. Like, we had... By this point in time, we had Castlevania and Metroid, and they're not RPGs, but they're showing, like, if you're exploring a large place, you should have a mini-map. So oftentimes, a lot of the dungeons, like, it's so easy, because of the way, like, it's drawn, like, the dungeons are drawn out, you don't know where to go. So it's, if you didn't, it was so easy to get lost, so it was actually very frustrating sometimes. And I think the worst part is that because you get lost, you start running into a lot of enemies and you run out of MP. And that also that issue is made worse by the fact that there's almost no healing points in some dungeons. Or like some didn't have any at all, especially the final dungeon. The final dungeon doesn't have any at all. So you're going to go into any fight with like not full health. And, like, you're, like, by the time you climb up... So, basically, what often happened was, like, okay, I finally climbed to the top of the dungeon. Well, crap, I can't beat the boss because I don't have enough MP. So, you have to use your MP restorative items. But then, you don't always have the luxury of using it because the MP restoration is really expensive. 2,000 gold. I mean, like, at some point... At most points in the game, you don't have enough to pay for it. So... You're just stuck with either, like, what I've faced. It's, like, the dilemma of, like... Well, I could try to beat the boss, or I could warp down and heal up and try to get back up here again. And often I opted for the second strategy, but it wasn't very fun. It doesn't feel good because like going through a dungeon twice is like a chore, and like so doing anything in dungeons is chore. So that's why I was like dreading doing more dungeons. I'm kind of glad I'm done with them for now. So you have no mini-maps, so you get lost, and then you have not enough healing points. And I get that this is a old game, and I guess that was a luxury in the past. But even like a point to like you could use a tent. Yeah, there's no tent ability, so you're basically like looking for those goddess statues, and they're almost never in dungeons unless like it was rough, yeah. And that kind of made every dungeon, like, I never felt comfortable doing a dungeon. Like, in other games, like, sometimes I do the dungeon, like, oh, I'm enjoying it. Like, I do fight a lot of enemies, so it's kind of annoying, too. And that happened a lot, where, like, encounter rate's really high. There's so many enemies. And you just don't have the resources. You have to spend your resources to take on them. But at the same time, you don't want to be no resources by the time you reach the top or the end of the dungeon, so it's just like, oh jeez. So it just made every dungeon became kind of a chore, or just a pain. And like I think like the later ones later on were so easy to get lost. It was kind of rough. So I think honestly, like in spite of how like I enjoyed the other, I feel like the gameplay is the weakest part of the game. Like, it's not unplayable, or it's not, like, as frustrating as, like, some other games I've definitely played from this era, but, like, there's so many things that would make things much more improved. And it's just unfortunate, so, like, not maybe one of those factors alone wouldn't have been enough, but, like, all those factors together contribute to this like feeling of like, oh, I dread going to dungeons. They're so unfun to go. The enemies are too hard to avoid. It's impossible to avoid the enemies. The dungeon's too confusing, and so it's like, oh, it was just not fun half the time, and that pretty much hurt my enjoyment of the game, to be perfectly honest. And so that's why I'm not too thrilled. Like, I'm not too happy about that aspect of playing Lunar Eternal Blue. Basically, it became like, well, I'm hoping the story's cool. Oh, I gotta play this dungeon. Oh, yuck. Very annoying. So, I guess that means that's all, like... Oh, and by the way, in terms of controls, really quickly, like, for the most part, they're fine. It's just a turn-based RPG, so it's kind of, like, control is not a big deal. I do wish that when you're doing the... I had an idea, so... When you're running around in dungeons, like, it's so finicky, so sometimes you can't run because your character will just stop in their tracks no matter... Like, it's really, really weird. Is it like Xenogears? Oh, level of dungeon... No. I didn't want to mention Xenogears, but no, Xenogears is probably far worse. I would say Xenogears is still worse, but only because the Lunar dungeons are not as big. But yeah, it was just like, so dreadful. And the controls are just like fighting you. You're like, I can run away from this. No, I can't. It just started slowing down for some reason. I don't understand why. Like, why would you do that? Why would you have a thing where your character just stops running and you start running really slow? It was like, oh, excuse me. Sorry about that. So, yeah, it's just like, why would they make the controls like that? It's the first RPG I've ever played where you suddenly stop dancing for some reason. And it's just like, oh, well, I guess I want the monsters to catch up to me. Yay! But yeah, that would drive me crazy. So, well, now that I've said all that, overall, would I recommend it? I guess... to a regular person who has not played the previous game, I don't think you should. You should probably play the previous game first, Silver Star Story Complete. So for regular people, maybe a thumbs up red. I mean, it's still a Japanese RPG, and it's still it can be pretty brutal and grinding. So maybe you might want to check it out. If you're an RPG person, I don't know. I think overall I had a positive experience, but mostly because the story is very interesting, and not because the gameplay is particularly compelling, unfortunately. So, yeah, that's pretty cool. So, anything else I want to say? So, and if you don't like RPGs, you probably forget it. This probably has all the things you hate about RPGs. Like, lack of direction, lack of unnecessary, like, forced encounters. It's just like, oh, everything wrong with the current industry, in the RPG industry sometimes. So, so yeah, overall, I would still say, I think if you're an RPG fan, like, I think you should definitely check it out, but the caveat is you probably should play Silver Star Story Complete so you can understand the story, because they really do expect you, I honestly don't expect you to know, but, like, there's some things that you would make more sense to you if you had played Silver Star Story Complete. So overall, I would say it's like, for RPG people, it's maybe thumbs up, like, rent, so to speak, or like just give it a try first and see if you like it. I mean, maybe it's not to everyone's taste, even for RP gamers, roleplay gamers. Other than that, for like regular people, maybe not, unless you really are interested in the genre, because I don't think it's that great of a representation, or it's that great to be played for its genre. So, yeah, I guess. Oh, is there anything else I want to say? So yeah, I don't think it's a thumbs up by, I said, like, I really love this game. It's more like, oh, it's fine. Fairly common, so. Yeah, so it's fine. I think, like, yeah, you definitely need to have played the prequel. So, overall, like, it was still a positive experience for me, but it was like some negative things happened. So yeah, so for everybody else, rent it if you're interested, but you don't have to, and you need the first game. For RPG gamers, like, you might be seasoned enough that this doesn't bother you as much. The story is pretty fun, pretty interesting, if you can get over the gameplay stuff. So maybe it's like thumbs up red. And yeah, if you haven't played RPGs, then you might not want to play it, because there are better ones you can start with for sure. So yeah, overall positive experience, but not without some negatives that I mentioned earlier. And with that, I guess that's the end of the review. So there you go. If you're an RPG gamer, maybe give it a try. If you're not any of those, then you might want to wait on it. It has everything you don't like, you might not like about Japanese RPGs. Anyway, so that concludes the review. So that means I'm gonna move on